We're going to keep rolling. We have 2 sessions left of our 35-hour marathon, Cannathon, Meadowlands digital experience. So next we're going to talk about keeping California cannabis craft and premium. We're going to hear from farmers and craft cultivators about genetics, organic growing guidelines, and what the new appellation of origin program means for California cannabis, which on September 30th, Gavin Newsom signed into law Senate Bill 67, urging legislation to establish the world's first cannabis appellations of origin program. And Genine, I know you're moderating this conversation, but I know you've done a lot of work around appellation, so I hope we'll hear from you about that a little bit as well. First up, we have Marley Lovell, who's the co-founder of Esensia, a premium craft sun-grown brand based in Hopland, California. Along with co-founder and childhood friend Ben Blake, they pride themselves in producing the highest quality sun-grown cannabis. Since 2010, Marley has run his Emerald Cup award-winning 10,000 square foot outdoor operation grounded in the heart of the Emerald Triangle. East of Hopland, his unique site is at an elevation of 2,300 feet, offering a sometimes dramatic environment that helps the farm produce unique genetics through in-house breeding and phenotype selection programs paired with organic farming practices. Welcome, Marley. Next, we have Julia Jacobson, who is the CEO and co-founder of Aster Farms, a sustainably grown cannabis company in Upper Lake County. Before starting the farm in 2016, Julia was once a Bloomingdale's merchandise buyer and worked in the tech industry. After experiencing a lack of transparency in the cannabis market, Julia decided to start Aster Farms, a brand for conscious consumers, to take back what it means to be organic. In 2018, the Mendocino complex fire burned through almost all of Julia's land, taking out all but 13 of their 600 plants. Now, after rebuilding and creating the farm of their dreams, Julia and her husband Sam and their director of cultivation, Noah, grow an acre of outdoor cannabis and have more than 5,000 square feet of greenhouse-grown cannabis with plans to expand. I've been to their farm. It's super beautiful. Welcome, Julia. So happy to have you here. Next, we have Aaron Keefer, who is the Vice President of Cultivation and Operations at Sonoma Hills Farm, a craft cannabis and culinary farm located in the Sonoma Valley that brings premium craft cannabis to the farm-to-table lifestyle. Sonoma Hills Farms strives to be a cultural and educational intersection of cannabis and traditional agriculture. Prior to joining Sonoma Hills Farm in February of this year, Aaron held a 10-year tenure as the culinary gardener for the Thomas Keller Restaurant Group, which includes the famed 3 Michelin star restaurant, The French Laundry in Napa. Welcome, Aaron. We're so grateful to have you here with us. Next, we have Neil Dellacava, who's the co-founder of Gold Seal, a cannabis cultivation brand located in the heart of San Francisco. Neil is an SF native with a nearly lifelong passion for cannabis. Since 2015, Gold Seal has focused on quality and unique genetics. They're known for their flagship strains like Red Congo and Cherry Cheesecake, which are both delicious. In January of 2018, Gold Seal became the first locally permitted cannabis cultivator and distributor in San Francisco, with a warehouse grow on the industrial outskirts of the city. Welcome, Neil. Finally, this conversation will be moderated by Genine Coleman, who is the founder of the Origins Council, a California 501c4 nonprofit education, research, and policy advocacy organization dedicated to sustainable rural economic development within cannabis-producing regions. They've established internationally and nationally recognized legally defensible standards-based geographic indication systems for cannabis. Genine is also the co-founder of the Mendocino Appellations Project, founded in 2015 to protect and support heritage farmers' historic transition into regulation through establishing appellation of origin designations for cannabis. Genine cultivated cannabis for more than 24 years before taking up cannabis patient and policy advocacy about 8 years ago. So thank you all so much for spending your Sunday with us. I'll hand it over to you, Genine. Take us away.
Thanks, Aria. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see so many friends, and I want to wish everyone a happy harvest. And a special shout out to Meadowlands. This is one of my favorite events, so I'm glad we're making it work virtually. I want to open the conversation by acknowledging that the state's rolling out a number of programs that will help us all really differentiate the unique qualities of our products. from a regional standpoint, and also from production standards and also product quality standards. So we've got 3 specific designation of origin programs rolling out. SB 67 was signed into law, as you were talking about, Aria, and that establishes a city of origin designation, which I'm personally really excited about and really want to acknowledge our urban producers, equity community, and our patient community, because the previous panel really, brought forward to me how important it is that we think about legacy in the broadest sense, in terms of the legacy producing community, hand in hand with the equity community and the patient and compassion community. So I want to thank everyone for their work and look forward to building this together and bringing our history into the new marketplace. So we've got a city of origin designation, and that is comparable to the county of origin designation, which has already been established. And just briefly, if folks aren't familiar with designations of origin, they're legal designations that acknowledge producing regions. And so they're defined by geography, and there's standards associated with them. For the county of origin and city of origin, the standard is that the product was produced 100% in that political boundary, right? So it's really a pride of place based on your city or your county designation. And then we've got appellation of origin. SB 67 established a terroir baseline, putting this program in line with the history and tradition of appellation of origin products worldwide for centuries. And the significance of the terroir baseline is that it really ties the quality of the product to the environment in which it was produced, and protects that designation was established through a causal link. So the environment, the cultivation methodologies, the culture of the place informs the unique product of that place. And then we've also got the OCAL program rolling out. And this is an organic equivalent program that the state's rolling out that's pretty much exactly parallel to the National Organics Program. And so city of origin and county of origin are legally available for folks to use. And then the appellation of origin and OCAL program are going to be rolling out in this new year coming forward. I'm really excited to be here with the panelists. You all have amazing experience to bring to this conversation. And so I want to start by putting the question forward to you guys to really kind of share what your relationship is with cannabis historically, what really kind of brought you to this moment in history with the work that you're doing. Why don't we go ahead and start with Julia?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. So my history with cannabis started recreationally. And then over the course of the years, I started to develop chronic migraines. They are hereditary. My mom has them. I saw it coming. And over the course of a few years, they became really debilitating to my life. I had a single migraine for 8 months straight and was in and out of the hospital multiple times. I was on a cocktail of pharmaceutical drugs that were giving me crazy side effects. I was literally desperate and reaching for anything. Somebody once said, try getting lidocaine shots in your forehead. And I ran out and got lidocaine shots in my forehead. So I was willing to do anything to get back my life. And one of the times that I was in the emergency room, the doctor said to me, do you feel comfortable with cannabis? Do you have access to cannabis? If so, you should try it for your migraines. And I had never thought about cannabis in my life that way. And, it was the last thing. When I have a migraine, the last thing I want to do is roll a joint and light it up and smoke. And I tried, and it was a game changer to my life. And so I was able to completely transition off of all my pharmaceutical drugs. I haven't been in the hospital for over 3 or 4 years now. And my entire life was regained. And so that was kind of the moment where cannabis went from something that was just fun in my life and part of my social life and recreation to actually being a seriously important part to my well-being and my ability to live my life. And at that same time, I had become really burnt out. I was in the tech industry for about 5.5 years at that point, and really wanted absolutely nothing to do with anything technology, anything digital. I had this bizarre desire to put my hands in the dirt, but I had never done anything like that. And so all things kind of pointed towards figuring out how cannabis and this agricultural world would fit into my new life. Luckily, my husband husband, who is my co-founder, his grandparents have been growing cannabis in Mendocino for 50 years now. And the family has a strong background in all organic and sustainable agricultural practices. So we kind of jumped in and learned the ropes and partnered up with somebody who is a professional grower. And that's where this story all began.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I love hearing everyone's personal story. I think that's what sets our community apart, you know, is our own personal journey, relationship with the plant. Neil, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard great things about you. Love to hear what your story is.
Nice to meet you as well. First of all, thanks so much to Meadow for having me. Really appreciate, you know, being able to speak with you guys. My relationship with cannabis started, I actually know the date, January 1st, 2000. So the first time I ever actually got high on cannabis was Millennium Midnight. So, you know, throughout high school, consumed cannabis. I'm a San Francisco native, so I've lived, you know, in San Francisco my whole life. So we've kind of had that sense, you know, even from a young age of quality cannabis, the culture of cannabis that existed. You know, I went to college down in Los Angeles, and at that time I got my medical card when I was 19 years old. So kind of, again, just started, you know, encompassing myself with cannabis culture, because that was when the dispensary started opening. You really started to be able to go to different places, you know, see different products come about, different strains come about. It wasn't just something in a bag that you just got very randomly. So, you know, all throughout college, I was kind of just, you know, going to the clubs, experimenting, really loving the whole aspect of the culture and the strains of cannabis. And then after I got out of college, I did a couple jobs there in Hollywood, and then decided to come back to San Francisco, where I decided to start working in the cannabis industry. So I've been working in the cannabis industry since 2008. Growing cannabis in San Francisco. Had the opportunity, you know, from a very young professional, especially with cannabis, to really start with all these different craft genetics, and really, you know, working with them, trying to find the best of the best. You know, in 2015, started, you know, seeing that, you know, the legalization was coming in. I partnered up with a couple of my other partners around that time, and we decided to start the brand Gold Seal. So Gold Seal is based in San Francisco. We basically try to concentrate on developing the best quality cannabis out there from start to finish. We do all of our own packaging. It's very important for us to be very hands-on to make sure that the quality comes out. And as we're talking about the craft of cannabis, I think is very important. And, you know, I also have the opportunity to be a retail buyer in the city of San Francisco for a couple of dispensaries. So I actually see a lot of cannabis out there. And, you know, it's really interesting to talk. It's really great to sit here and talk about craft cannabis, because I see a lot of cannabis, you know, not all of it, I would say, is very craft. There's only a few people. There's only a handful of people that I really feel concentrate on this plant as much and give it the attention and don't see it as a commodity. And we as Gold Seal really try to not treat it as a commodity. We try to treat it as something special. If it's something that doesn't work for us, we don't put it in our jar. It's the most important thing for us. We want to produce the best stuff out there and continue to, you know, seek out new genetics, look for new things. It's super important to us. So, you know, going forward, you know, that's where my journey, you know, was and where it's kind of landed now. So just super excited to keep moving forward.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for your excellent work. Really appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Marley, welcome to the conversation. Love to hear what your journey is.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks. Shout out to Meadow. Yeah, Neil hit right on the hit a lot of really important pieces that I would like to definitely echo. Yeah, I'm here at the garden in front of the Magic Wand. Here outside of Hopland in Mendocino. Yeah, my journey started, I would say, at birth. I always say that my name Marley really says a lot more about my parents than it does about me. So I really consider myself like a second generation member of this community. Really honored and really honored to like kind of continue the culture forward. And I think when I think of cannabis culture here in California, it really is all about the best cannabis anywhere in the world, right? So you know, I'm really happy to have this conversation. In terms of my relationship with the plant, yeah, it started really early. I was kind of around it in my community and in my family. It was used as a really communal thing. And then as I grew older, it was something that I used like in a really meditative, really kind of spiritual way. And then after I graduated college, I moved back to California. I went to school in Louisiana. So I went to school, went to college, came back, and I was working in the tech industry at Rhapsody, which is like a music streaming service. So I worked there for 8 years. That was kind of my trade. And I linked up with Ben Blake, who's my co-founder here at Esensia, and we started to just kind of mess around and kind of grow as a hobby in about 2009. And then going forward, we went on a journey with genetics, and that was really like it was a journey about trying to find the most interesting genetics, seeing what kind of things did well in our environment here, yeah, and that's kind of led us to now we have over 50 proprietary strains that we grow. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that during the genetic part of the conversation. But yeah, we're really focused on genetics and high quality. We really think of it as a three-pronged thing, starting with amazing genetics, growing with amazing cultivation, organic cultivation practices. We're doing kind of all living soils and compost teas out here. And then really finishing that off with an amazing environment, which we're, blessed here in Mendocino. Most of the time, obviously, fires present a lot of challenges. So, it'll be interesting to see how that impacts us going forward. But we're at 2,600 feet here, one of the highest elevations in the county, and we're blessed with a lot of air movement. So we've been blessed for the most part. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And looking forward to, we just launched our own brand. We have kind of our own branded jar. It's available kind of in limited quantities around California, small batch of all of our kind of proprietary genetics. It's been like the vision of many years of kind of growing and growing these interesting genetics, but really wanting to put our branding with them and really kind of share our story. So we're really thankful for that opportunity. So yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation.
Sweet, congratulations. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yes, thank you.
Chief Keith, it's nice to see you, Aaron. Welcome to the conversation. Tell us about how you got to this place and in history with cannabis. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. So Chief Keith, just a little bit behind that. My daughter set the Zoom up for me because I'm not on a computer very much. So there you go. So I started out smoking cannabis at 15 after a swim meet. Chucky Stewart, my neighbor, you want to smoke some weed? And I had my first experience with cannabis at that point in time. I grew my first plant when I was 16. My friend's father had gone to Amsterdam and brought back some skunk number 1 back in the, I guess it was back in 87. He brought back skunk number 1. I grew that plant and kind of started growing when I was very, very young, and put myself through culinary school by growing weed, and went to culinary school, became a chef for years, and then kind of fell in love with the, I was always in love with marijuana as a plant, and I fell in love with all plants through marijuana, trying to grow marijuana and learning about that plant. And then I fell in love with all plants. So I started growing vegetables for chefs, and then moved into becoming the head farmer for French Laundry over there in Napa, California. At the same time, having warehouses and growing top shelf medical cannabis for Grassroots and Apothecarium and Piece of Medicine. And so I was growing vegetables at the highest level and trying to grow cannabis at the highest level indoors as well. And they're really very, very similar. I mean, it is just a plant, and you're just trying to unlock the secrets of that particular plant, whether it's celeriac or cannabis or, Mokum carrots, and kind of fell in love with how the flavors of plants that were grown in live soil are completely different than the flavors of what I was growing inside. And I mean, indoor growing can be top notch. You're controlling the environment completely, but you're still missing just a little bit about the soil. Outside, you can grow completely live soil. You can grow in accordance with nature. And there's just a little je ne sais quoi that comes with outdoor cannabis that you can't really get inside, even though I love indoor cannabis completely. Outdoor cannabis can be ruined overnight with some issues that you can't control. Mother Nature always kind of takes hers, but that was my journey with cannabis, is to really try to strive and grow the best quality, best flavor cannabis I can. And that led me to come to Sonoma Hills Farm last February. It had been a dream of the partners of Sonoma Hills Farm for a while. They'd worked for about 2.5 years to get the permit. They fought hard in Sonoma. Sonoma wasn't the easiest place to get a permit for growing cannabis. And February 10th, I started. We were just bare grasslands pretty much. And during COVID, we put in 2.5 miles of pipe, fencing, and started our first crop. 28,560 square feet is what we grew this year. We're hoping to expand next year into a state-of-the-art greenhouse as well as a processing center. But we did well this year. We grew a lot of great varieties, 7 mains and 27 varieties overall, which is a little, maybe 1 plant of this and 2 plants of that. We've had some fun with growing out there because we are 9 miles from the ocean. So we get a little bit more moisture than is probably perfect for the plant, but we were able to mitigate that the best we can. And we're very, very happy with the first crop. There's 2 that are starting to dry down already, and we tried, and we're pretty happy with that compared to the same genetics that we've had grown in other environments. So we're excited to bring Sonoma Hills Farm to the shelf this year, and you will see it with some co-branding and in some jars.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate it. Well, Julia, I've got a question I want to kind of start with you. So from my perspective, I think like the first place to start this conversation about craft cannabis is to acknowledge that cannabis is a medicine. And I think with that comes, an extra layer of responsibility to how it's grown, the quality of the product, the considerations about the market, and that this is medicine, right, to many, many people. And your story as a patient, right, coming to production, I would like to kind of hear from you, what are your thoughts around production quality, standards around production, product quality standards, and in particular, in looking at your company and part of what you guys embrace is really organic production. And so I'm interested if you guys are thinking about pursuing the OCal certification and then moving on to the National Organics Program for your products.
Absolutely. So I think, I'll touch on the organic certification first. It's been very challenging the last couple of years because while there are comparable certification programs, none of them have been named anything that is deemed organic to the consumer. Aster Farms were Clean Green certified, and nobody knows what Clean Green certified means other than people on this Zoom meeting right now. So it has been quite the educational hurdle for us to communicate to our consumers that we're not allowed to be called organic, that we use organic inputs and organic practices. So I think this certification is going to be a huge step because my understanding is organically grown will be allowed in terms of verbiage, and to be able to articulate that to consumers in a way that they already understand, I think is going to be a complete game changer for the industry and for those of us who use those practices. I remember, and this is a mom moment. I remember when my mom once said to me, and this was when I was a recreational user, do you know if you're organic, so you're smoking organic weed? And I was like, Mom, come on. But in my head, it was like this mind-blowing moment where I was like, of course it's all organic. And then I looked into it. I'm like, of course, most of it is not organic actually. And that was just mind-blowing for me to think that this plant that is medicinal, has this history as such a medicinal plant, and as it's been grown in so many organic ways, has been really polluted and has been affecting the environment, has been, toxic ingredients have been used in pesticides, in grow practices in the past. And so for us, it was absolutely crucial to be putting a product out there that we felt perfectly safe and happy consuming, and not just something that skids by the testing and just gets by the parts per billion of pesticides or any chemicals, but that is truly 100% clean, 0 parts per billion of any pesticides, any chemicals. And so that's how we consume as consumers. We shop, we buy organic vegetables. We care about the companies and that we spend our money with. And so cannabis should be the same way for us. And I think particularly when you're talking about it in a medicinal sense, and particularly in a medicinal sense, not just for getting those additional benefits, which I'll get into in a second, but also just in the fact that people who are consuming cannabis medicinally are most likely consuming a lot of cannabis. And so for me, I think it's important for that to be the cleanest product you're putting in your body. And in terms of some of those practices, like Marley was saying, we are also using regenerative practices. We're growing in live soil in the ground, not in pots above ground. So we're building a real ecosystem of fungi, microorganisms, worms. It's an entire ecosystem. We say at Aster Farms, we're not feeding the plants, we're feeding the soil because the soil is feeding the plants. And I think it's a real indicator of plant health and what you're actually getting medicinally out of the plant, just in looking at the total environment in which those plants are grown, not just the plant itself, but the surrounding environment. So at Aster Farms, we also have a non-cannabis terpene garden that we use for multiple reasons. One, to bring beneficial insects into our site, also to attract pollinators, and lastly, to really be an indicator of diversity in plant life, diversity in the microorganisms and creatures that are on our property, because it is a true ecosystem. And we believe that growing in live soil, having that ecosystem helping feed your plants, that's what creates an incredibly rich terpene profile. That's what creates a really complex cannabinoid profile. And you can pump your plants with nutrients to get the THC as high as you want, but that's a very different high. That's a very different effect that you're getting than when you're smoking sun-grown in live soil, really complex cannabinoid profiles and terpene profiles. So that's what we believe in, and that's what we try to do at Aster Farms.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. There's a very high plant to love ratio here, and I think that's everything, really. Marley, I'd love to turn to you and dig into the genetics a bit. So the appellation program offers an opportunity for petitioning farmers to define and put some specific standards in place for cultivars. And in those conversations leading up to this moment, it's been, kind of an interesting challenge. How do we define our cultivars, right? What really is the process? Do we have consensus, right, about the identity of these cultivars? How do we work with the craftspersons who have been developing these genetics, in some cases over generations, to really protect that heritage? And so I'm curious how y'all really protect your work from an intellectual property standpoint.
Yeah, wow, that's an incredible question, and it's one that we've spent the better part of the last 5 years really doing. I think one thing that you hit on, which I think is really important here, is that the work that has been done before us, and like all of the people that have been working with the plant over the years that have really allowed us to kind of get here, because we're just, with genetics, you're kind of building, it's like a building block, right? So I'm building upon a lot of the things that, when we, used to buy seeds back, 10 years ago from Amsterdam, and, try to find interesting, weird genetics. So, I think, so basically our process is about a 3 or 4 year process here, since we're only kind of doing one cycle outdoor. So we are growing a seed stock that's, in the past, we have a Chernobyl phenotype that we call lime juice. That was a phenotype that we kind of isolated from a Chernobyl seed batch. But most of our other genetics are actually, I guess all of our other genetics that we cultivate are crosses that we have done from since then. Not necessarily with lime juice. We do have one lime juice cross that we just released last year. But basically we grow a seed batch, identify about 50 to 100 female plants, harvest them all separately, identify really, and we're really looking for, we take notes on the growing process, but it's really more about the bud the bud quality at the end. That's really all we really are focused on, since we're really focused on, you know, a premium craft product. So we're kind of focused on that bud. We kind of have our clones that we've taken during the vegetative cycle. The next year we will grow a clone batch of probably several phenotypes from that batch and kind of see which ones do the best from like a plant clone perspective. And then after that, then we'll grow it again. And that's what kind of when we'll isolate and really identify, okay, this is the one that we're going to go for, identify, give it a name, and then kind of go forward. As we've been along the journey, we've almost lost a lot of things. We have lost a lot of things, but not nearly as much as we've been able to retain. A big part of that process has been working with a tissue culture lab in Davis to kind of store our genetics. And it actually is something that came after a pest outbreak in our mother room that we almost lost a lot of our genetics. So in that process, we've it's been something that has like really allowed us to really feel like we can go forward, and then not only keep the integrity of the genetics that we've developed, but then also kind of scale them for the future. So yeah, we're really excited, you know, with that work. That's been amazing. We also have started to do kind of plant identifiers in order for this IP protection. The IP protection, as you know, is really complicated because it's a Schedule I drug, Schedule I substance according to the federal government, and so therefore we can't get a federal patent. But we can't get a plant patent, but there are some interesting ways to kind of protect that locally here in California. You know, for us, really, we've kept them all exclusive to us. We just started working with a nursery in order to kind of get out some of our genetics because we've developed so many genetics over the years, we have a lot of genetics that we don't necessarily grow every year. So we've looked into licensing those plants and kind of seeing them and kind of getting them out there in the world, which is exciting to kind of see. That's not necessarily always our focus, but it is a really exciting kind of other journey to go on. So yeah, so there's the kind of the protection thing, the process of kind of finding these unique genetics. And I mean, for us, like, we're really focused on what are the capabilities of this plant? What's the potential of this plant? Like, it has such incredible potential. We've seen, you know, some of our flower tests are the terpene tests are just getting amazing. I think not only because of the cultivation practices, but really because of we're starting to look and understand more from, you know, instead of testing for 8 terpenes, now we're testing for 40 terpenes. So that process, I think, is exciting for us. And I think it's great for the consumer as well. And we're all learning, right, in this process. So in terms of, I think I've heard a lot of people touch on it with the sun grown, with the quality of sun grown, but there's still kind of I'm sorry, I can't forget his name, but the Je ne sais quoi, that's a perfect way to say it. But I think that hopefully soon we'll be able to have qualitative and quantitative data for those things and really understand the entourage effect more, because we're starting to see some really interesting cannabinoid breakdowns and terpene breakdowns that are starting to kind of like give some context to that experience. So yeah, really excited to kind of see where things continue to go.
Thanks, Marley. I love your passion. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what really drives innovation, right? And that's a lot of what we're trying to protect, you know, is to keep our vibes up and keep that passion kindled.
Absolutely.
So Neil, I would love to hear from you about the culture and identity of San Francisco, right? This is a 20-year history for you personally. And moving forward, as we try to penetrate consumer awareness about our products and our pride of place, I'm curious if you're interested in pursuing a city of origin in San Francisco, and what that might look like in terms of other producers in San Francisco that you might want to work with, and specifically, like, what would that narrative be that you would want to communicate to the consumer about, you know, your pride of place and producing craft cannabis in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think it leads to that question that people ask me a lot is why would you grow cannabis in San Francisco? Everybody sees the real estate prices, they see the cost of living in San Francisco. And I think, that's the question that I think I get a lot. And it kind of comes, to what you're speaking of, having this sort of origin, I think is super important. It's the reason why, when me and my partners decided, where we were going to go, what direction we were going to take to stay in the city, was because we saw how important it was to have that San Francisco. Like I'm a native. San Francisco is extremely important to me. If you know a real San Francisco native, they take a lot of pride in their city and where they come from. So that is me probably, to the T right there, San Francisco. So when creating the brand many years ago, Gold Seal San Francisco was always meant to say San Francisco. Mainly at first because of, the pride I have for the city, but also as it went along, it's what that does on your jar, what that does on your brand. Part of being, there's the craft aspect, but there's also the branding aspect that we have to look at it as well. I mean, important thing moving forward, is building your brand, how that works. And it's been, extreme concentration of Gold Seal over the years to really be focused on the brand, developing it. And San Francisco is important for that. There's a lot of other operators here. There's a few other people that rep San Francisco on the stuff. And I love it. It's great. It's great that there are people that are able to operate here. It's very important for everybody to be able to have that, because if you look at, San Francisco, I think a lot of people, if they were just, grabbing it from outside of the city, people see San Francisco as that mecca of cannabis, where, everybody kind of came together and, all the best quality cannabis. I'm sure when people think California, San Francisco is one of the cities that definitely, comes on the radar when people think about that. So it's extremely important for us to, be able to highlight that. And I think it's going to be extremely important for every brand, in every different region. And I think it's a really great thing, that they've now signed the bill and we're able to kind of narrow it down a little bit more. I don't know if I'll be able to, do the terroir with my, soil and all that stuff, because I don't have living soil with what we do. But, definitely the city of origin will always be on the jar. It will always be an important selling point for us and our brand and our cannabis.
Yeah, I think, that's one of the really important things. Everyone knows the expense for branding and getting that consumer penetration. So I think the opportunity to come together under a regional brand and really leverage, the collective resources there, I think is going to make a huge difference. And I think it's going to make a huge difference to the consumer to start to make those connections of products of place. Aaron, I'd love to turn to you. You have an incredible history, with your experience with French Laundry and the broader region of Napa Valley, and the premier acknowledgement of that region, I think is very powerful experience to bring into craft cannabis. Part of what our organization focuses on is rural economic development. And I think, right now with where policy sits on the state level and the local level, it's kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of the challenges, right? You were speaking to in Sonoma County, for example, right, to get to the place where you're permitted in land use considerations. And one thing that's been a little bit of a challenge, which is a bit surprising, is to really frame the opportunity around agritourism and a craft model of development in a region. And I think it's starting to really percolate with local policymakers. They see the opportunity to feed into that and really develop an agritourism model, right, in the region that can bring tourism. It can support, a farm to table model and tasting rooms and that model of development with awareness around sustainability. And I know that's a lot of the vision that's feeding into Sonoma Hills Farm. And so I'd love for you to speak to kind of what you see the opportunity is to bring that experience and what's worked, right, in other regions, frankly, for hundreds of years, and bring it into these producing regions and really bring it forward from a development standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to speak to Napa Valley first, and then I'll go into Sonoma County, where we currently are growing. Napa Valley has created this this kind of mythology surrounding it. It's really kind of a small valley, and they're very protective of their name, their brand, what goes on a bottle. And what's special about it, it is an agricultural region that's within an hour of 8 million people of driving. So, you know, it has the infrastructure to do the tourism, it has the hotels, it has the restaurants, it has the other activities. It's not just wine, it's not just agritourism. So we have everything you need to have a great time if you come spend a weekend. You don't just have to drink wine the whole time. You can see a lot of other things. And I think that's where Sonoma has the upper hand as well. We're within an hour's drive of 8 million people. If you want to go up to the birthplace or the Emerald Triangle, where really the cannabis culture has settled in and become kind of the biggest culture of the place, you know, that's the last economy left up there. I would have to say that when you're driving 4 or 5 hours, it's a little more difficult to get to. Whereas when you fly into San Francisco or you live in San Francisco Bay Area, you can get to Sonoma pretty easily. Sonoma has plenty to do other than just tasting wine or having cannabis. And we just look to be the first Marrow winery on the West Coast, that close to San Francisco and something you can drive to and have a great time. We have cannabis, 28,560 square feet of it, and that's behind the green fence with the cameras on it, of course. But outside of that, we have 3 acres of vegetables. We have Highland cattle, a Wagyu cross, which is the American Wagyu. We have pigs, we have sheep, we have lots of dogs and chickens. We have a lot to do out there. We have buildings that are of interest, an old century barn that's been curated, it's beautiful. So if you come up to Sonoma Hills Farm, it's not just about the cannabis, it's a whole farm. And you can see, okay, out here we have hemp. We have a hemp license in Sonoma. And outside the fence, we have hemp, looks just like cannabis, smells like cannabis. But behind the fence, we have cannabis. And I kind of liken that to, I call that my white peaches. My white peaches are outside and you can grow them around the world, around the country for sure. But behind the fence, you have your yellow peaches and they need a camera on them and they're apparently dangerous. You need a fence around it with barbed wire. So we're trying to educate everybody that this is just a plant. There is no toxicity known to man associated with it. It is a healing plant, but it is just part of agriculture, and around it you have an entire farm that supports the growing of that plant. And to Julia's point, we have an apiary, we have bees, we have about a quarter acre of insectary plants and beneficial plants for pollinators. We have a lot of diversity on the farm, and that does feed into the overall growing environment for the cannabis. It's not just in a box growing cannabis behind a wall. It's part of the farm. And we're hoping to be able to show that to the world one day and have people come up and taste and hang out and enjoy, you know, shoot guns on our BB gun range and just be, you know, a farm boy for the afternoon as you try our beautiful sun-grown cannabis. And we'll also have a really state-of-the-art greenhouse that'll be light supplemented with LEDs. You know, we're trying to be as energy conservative as possible with that, but try to showcase the indoor growing as well as the outdoor growing for our brand, Sonoma Hills Farm. We're hoping to, you know, be one of the first attractions close enough to be accessible by everybody in the Bay Area. Of course, a lot has to change on the policy level to get there, though. You know, currently you can't consume cannabis on a site that's growing cannabis. Currently, you can't just come as a public person and tour a cannabis company. So we're hoping to work with the county supervisors and the state level senators and try to get this passed, because at one point in time, as alcohol came out of prohibition, there was a lot of restrictions around it, and those have eased up. And a lot of people don't realize that you couldn't buy wine directly from a winery unless there was an educational part to it, which led to the tours for a long time. We now can purchase wine directly from a winery, and that's only been in the last 20 years though. So we're hoping to kind of like make a little quicker stride with cannabis than we did with wine, since you know, alcohol came out of prohibition back in the 30s. We're hoping to accelerate that, and hopefully within 2 years, 3 years, we can bring agro business dollars to Sonoma County as well. Because Sonoma County is all about agriculture. They have Right to Farm Act that was passed in 1978, and pretty much farming is king in Sonoma. They can, if you're farming out there, anything but cannabis, which is considered to be a business, not actual agriculture, you can pretty much do what you want. You can have farm tours, you can have sales offsite, and we're looking to have that model applied to cannabis at some point in time at Sonoma Hills Farm.
Well, it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's fun to watch it develop. I know so much work has gone into it. So
it's a beautiful spot too.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to offer one question to the group, and we can kind of go around in a circle as we get towards the end of the panel. And it's really about the vision for the future, and how California as a region and all the work that you're individually doing can play, in the larger spectrum of an interstate or national and international market. There are some, there's some policy endeavors happening. There's a conversation around interstate commerce and structuring that potentially through compacts between legalized states and starting to move the ball forward to, expand the market. We're going to see what happens in November, the rest of the year in terms of federal policy. There's changes happening on the international level with respect to the scheduling of cannabis. And so there's a lot of mountains moving right now with respect to policy and also market development. And so I think, as we're all moving forward and we're building, our organizational visions, our business visions, our craft, we're all kind of thinking about where this is headed and what the trajectory is. And so my question to you all is, what really is your vision about where this is headed? What is our footprint as California Cannabis? And, what's your vision for your company and your work moving forward into a market that's beyond California? And Julia, I'd love to start with you.
I think that's a great question. So I would start with the fact that going back to wine, there's wine grown in Michigan, there's wine grown in Long Island. People still search out and pay a premium for wine grown in California. And that is because of the terroir, that is because of the environment, the climate, the soil, all of that, and the tradition. And so I really believe that cannabis is going to be the same way, especially as interstate opens up. California is going to be the best place where cannabis is grown, and the place, the cannabis that is coveted across the country. So we as a brand at Aster Farms, we are California first for sure. We believe that when interstate opens up, there will be a huge opportunity for California brands. I think one of the more interesting things, and going back to the conversation about craft cannabis, is that unlike other agricultural crops, cannabis does have the potential to stay craft. You don't need 100 acres to grow and to supply a large amount of beautiful flower for consumers. And so, whereas corn, you need hundreds and thousands of acres. Other agricultural products, you need so many acres of the product. So there is an opportunity for craft to remain in cannabis. And I think what we're going to see over the course of the next year, and particularly over the next 5 years, is a split in the market. We're going to see true craft cannabis maintain, and that's going to be the cannabis that you're buying in jars. That's the flower that you're actually looking at the quality, smelling it, opening it up, breaking it up yourself. And then we're going to see commoditized cannabis. And we're already seeing that. Some of these, 100,000 square foot plus greenhouse operations. And that's going to be the cannabis that becomes biomass and is turned into extracted products for the enormous market out there that is tinctures and edibles and topicals and everything else out there. So we at Aster Farms are very optimistic about both the future of craft cannabis and its place in the market, and the importance of California first, and are super excited for the days when we are able to send our California sun-grown cannabis to Michigan and New York and to all of our friends across the country.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it, Julia. Marley, what's your vision? Where's this headed, and where are you guys pushing it for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for us, California is such a huge market. In Mendocino, we're limited to 10,000 square feet per parcel. So our current permit is just 10,000 square feet. We'd love to get an additional parcel, but that means only in Mendocino, we'd only be able to have 20,000 square feet. That has, going back to the craft story, we saw that Mendocino's always been focused on kind of small scale, high quality. And so that's how we kind of positioned our brand. We love the idea of being able to have our brand, in other states. And I think for us, it'll be an interesting as we scale, and making sure that we kind of are able to maintain the integrity of the quality of our product, because that's really the most important thing for me. I would much prefer to grow an acre of really, really high quality stuff than to grow, 20 acres of kind of, middle of the road stuff. That's just kind of my personal opinion, and but I do think that it'll be interesting to see where that craft scale ends up, because I do think that we can do more than 10,000 square feet. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to get our California sun-grown amazing craft cannabis all over the state, all over the country and the globe. And hopefully we can be part of that journey. I think that, California's tradition is so rich, that it's a really important part to share, with the country. And I hope that there's that opportunity. So we'll kind of see how things play out.
Neil, what do you think? I mean, how's this going to impact your passion and what you're doing and the market you're working in as things open up?
Coming from an indoor grower's perspective, I think people see a little bit easy for, our brand to just pick up, go to multiple states, open up warehouses in multiple states, expand it maybe a little bit easier than some of the other people. But, for me, I don't have a problem scaling out as long as we can keep our craft and our quality there. As long as that exists, let's scale. But the most important thing about us, what we do, again, is that quality, is that craft. And I believe that there's a certain degree, at least now, this is so new, cannabis, especially indoor grows are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I haven't found many of them that have been able to scale intelligently that way, to be able to keep their quality that way. So for us, I feel like the focus at this moment in time is on California. It's on that market. It's making sure that we're putting out the best of the abilities that we are here. And then I believe that your reputation speaks for itself. People will want to grab your product. People want your product in more places because of what you've built and what you put out onto the market. So continuing to do that now, with looking towards the future eventually to expanding to more states, I'll just be honest with you, it's not really on my mind right now. I want to get California right and make sure that we're producing the right amounts. But obviously, it's something that you think that, you have a thought about, you think about, but, I think down the line, if we can continue to, again, get that quality, then I don't have a problem moving forward. But let's just, focus right now. There's a lot of focus that we all need to have.
Agreed. I think the ability to focus, in some ways, I think opening the markets might afford more focus on the craft producers here really growing for the market in California. So I think that's a really crucial perspective as well. Aaron, what are your thoughts for the vision for the future and opening markets, and how will it impact what you guys are working on there at Sonoma Hills Farm?
Well, California produces 60% of all the fruits and vegetables all across the country. I mean, we have the environment, we have the talent, we have the growing capability. I don't see why cannabis would be any different. In Michigan, New York, where I grew up, it's a different place 7 months out of the year than California. So I think that we are poised to become the producer of cannabis for the entire country. But when you're talking about craft cannabis, it is about attention to detail. It is about paying close attention to every step of the process. For me, craft cannabis starts with genetics first and foremost, and then you're going into the live soil. You're going to how you grew it, the environment, And then at the end of the day, you can turn gold into straw overnight. You really need to cure it correctly. So if you pay attention to every step of the way, you can bring quality to the final shelf, and that's what we're looking to do. Currently, when I think of going to a party or going to a celebration and bringing a gift to maybe a wedding, like you're going to bring a nice bottle of champagne or a really great bottle of wine. And I don't really see that yet in the cannabis market. There's not something you can walk in and go, oh, wow, thank you for that really great product. And we're hoping to kind of get to that point where we can bring maybe something that is very special to the market, where you can say, this is Sonoma Hills Farm Cannabis, and it's presented in a way that will impress everybody when you walk into a room. We aren't looking to be the biggest. We're looking to be really great quality. When I was a chef, I wouldn't cook anything that I wouldn't eat, and as a farmer, I wouldn't grow anything and bring it into the kitchen, anything that I wouldn't want to cook with. And it's the same with cannabis. I'm not going to bring to market anything that I wouldn't want to put in my body, because at the end of the day, we're not ingesting the genetics or how it was cured. We're ingesting the life of that plant. That's what we're putting into our body. And we're hoping to, kind of curate and create a product that we'd be happy to put into our own bodies.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate it. Well, Aria, I want to say thanks for having us, and it's been a great conversation. I always appreciate Meadowlands, so thank you so much.